Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the February 26th, 2025 meeting of the Oregon Early Learning Council. We're very excited to be in person in Salem today. And it's just fun to see real live three-dimensional people. So glad to be here. Gabby, will you call the roll for us?
Yes. So we have Chair Miller, who is here. Katie Brooks is excused. Peter Buckley.
Here.
Elizabeth Farrar Campbell. Here. Robin Hill Dunbar. Here. Dr. Peg Miller will be joining later. Subin O.
Here.
Ruby Ramirez.
Here.
And Marie Simons. Here. Okay, you have quorum.
All right. Thanks, Gabby. Okay, so today we get to focus on one of our other 2025 priorities, as the council knows, and this is the home visiting system collaboration. And we have one of the newest DELC members joining us right now. A familiar face,
Yes.
just a new. Welcome, Carrie.
Thank you, Sue.
Glad to have you here. Congratulations. I think. Reassuring. Oh, my goodness. Well, we love having people, yes, who know us well, join the team. So we're going to be talking about home visiting today, the fact that we are heavily invested in this, both in time and also a real focus for the council. As the council knows, we have one standing committee of the council, and it is the Home Visiting System Committee. So that really shows the emphasis that we're placing on it. When we discussed home visiting at our retreat in October, we were really clear that this year we want to have a focus on prenatal to 2-year-olds. And we understand from research and experience that home visiting is one of the best strategies for supporting those families. So I want to thank Peter Buckley and Peg Miller for co-chairing that committee. It's a big commitment, and we appreciate the work that you're doing with that, including testifying tomorrow. So with that, I want to turn it over to Beth Green, but I just want to say that many of us have worked with Beth for a while, as in some decades. We've all been around for a while. And we're just very fortunate, Beth, that when we asked if you would help pull together home visiting system coordination, you said yes. So we greatly appreciate that affirmation. I think that was that 2 years ago?
It was just over a year ago.
A year ago.
Feels
30s. Well, we're very
about to have her
fortunate.
first year anniversary.
Yeah.
All right, coming up.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for being here. We'll let you introduce your team, but we really appreciate your leadership.
Thank you, Sue. It's a pleasure to be here. It was an honor to be asked to lead this work. So my name is Beth Green. I'm the Director of Early Childhood and Family Support Research. I work at Portland State University, and I'm also the Director of the Center for Coordinating Oregon Home Visiting Systems, which is about a year old today. So I'm really excited to have this opportunity today to talk with you about some findings from a home visiting system landscape report that we worked on last year. Carried around in my binder. We're going to hear from some regional partners who are doing amazing work at the local level to coordinate and bring together home visiting systems and programs. And then hopefully talk with the council to hear, after hearing recommendations that came up from those regional partners about what the state can do to support better home visiting systems integration, to better support regional implementation. I get some thoughts from you about your thoughts about next steps. All right, so you all received copies of the report. I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through it. It's a treasure trove of information about the work that's happening in home visiting across the state. So I do encourage you to read it. I want to share a little bit of background about how we developed the report, and then just some key takeaways and findings, and then move into recommendations. So first of all, to develop the landscape, our team interviewed over 60 regional and local leaders in early childhood home visiting systems. So we talked to hub directors, we talked to other folks doing systems work at the regional level, such as the McBee system grant managers, the Family Connects Oregon alignment specialists. And then we also talked to 22 different home visiting program model leads across the state. So we got a lot of information. We focused the interviews on sort of three aspects of the system building process that were prioritized by the council last year. Those were governance and leadership. So who's leading and how is home visiting system coordination work being led at the local and regional levels? Coordinated intake and enrollment. So looking at service coordination and how communities are helping improve access to services and referral processes into services. And then the third element was family leadership and how that's being engaged in the home visiting system work. And within each of those areas, we asked folks to share their successes, as well as what they felt helped get there. So what supported their successes, as well as what got in the way or what gets in the way. And then what needs to change, especially looking at what can the state do to support better regional implementation that's consistent across the state. Today, we're going to focus just on the first two, so governance and coordinated intake and enrollment, and hopefully come back at future dates, talk about family leadership. I want to start just by sharing a few key takeaways, none of which are going to probably be surprising. But first of all, we heard, and not surprising, is that there's a ton of variability across the state and how the work is coming together around early childhood home visiting program and system coordination, who's leading it, what parts of the system different regions have focused on. So there's just a lot of different ways that regions are approaching the work. Secondly, that where this work is happening, those folks have a ton of information to share that would be useful to other regions who maybe aren't as far along in their home visiting systems work. And we tried to describe all of those places where unique work is happening. We'll hear from some today, but how the state can think about elevating those voices and sharing the learning so that other regions don't have to be recreating the wheel all the time in putting their home visiting systems partners together. And then the third takeaway, which is not going to be surprising, is that the places that have been able to advance the systems work more comprehensively have also typically had access to some kind of targeted resources focused on home visiting systems. And that includes funding from philanthropy, such as the Ford Family Foundation, funding through McBee, which provides a small amount of systems coordination funding for their 15 communities. And then Family Connects Oregon, which also includes some funding for community alignment, which is related to systems building and connecting of resources. So resources are really important for shaping the work. Okay, with that in mind, I do want to move to recommendations. So Gabby, you could put that slide up. So we not only took learnings from what they shared around what supports and what gets in the way, but we asked the people that we interviewed, what would you recommend that state leaders do to really help move the system along and help you with your regional implementation? So I'm going to, we will summarize them, but I can give Gabby a minute. You have, right?
Yeah.
I can go ahead and keep talking. So I really boiled these up. There's more detailed, again, recommendations in the report and in the executive summary. But the first thing that we heard really loud and clear was that regional partners would benefit from shared guidance from the state around the expectation that there will be early childhood home visiting systems work. So hub directors in some places have taken this on, in other places not so much. In other places, public health is playing more of a role. And what we also heard was that regions don't want to be told exactly how to do it in their region, but clarity, especially from cross agency partners, so CCOs, Oregon Health Authority, DELC, ODE, having those agencies come together to create some shared expectations that the work will happen and that those partners should come together around early childhood home visiting was seen as important, with flexibility for regional implementation. Again, we heard over and over again, like we've done a bunch of work, don't make us do it over, take what we've learned and let us build on it. The second recommendation is really around, again, helping regions learn from each other. So how can regions that have done more work in different pieces of, whether it's family leadership or coordinated intake enrollment or systems collaboration, like let's share those learnings across the regions with all the partners. Hubs, of course, are often a systems leader, but there's other partners who are doing a lot of system and service coordination, sometimes through public health, for example. So sharing resources and templates and examples, so we're not recreating the wheel from scratch every place. And then, of course, not surprisingly, we heard about resources and the need for more equitable resources. So maybe thinking about, is there a way to create some base funding for home visiting systems work that would be available to all the regions, because not all regions have McVie Family Connects yet, or philanthropic investments. We also heard about the importance of family leadership and funding for that as a piece of governance, that really we need families with lived experience in early childhood home visiting to be part of the early childhood system building work. And in some areas, again, that's happening, and in others, it's really not. So then the last recommendation, so resources is the third. The last recommendation, which we also heard loud and clear, is for support for community awareness building from the state. So we heard, we need to make home visiting a norm, right? We need to make this something that doctors know their patients can get, pregnant people and families can get and should be referred to. And we need families to understand what it is, that it's not something scary, that it's not someone coming into your home to report you to the system, but to support new babies, new parents. And getting that word out does not require model-specific information. It requires general community awareness and social media education for home visiting. And that was something they saw as maybe the state could take a role in helping to create or support that work. Okay, I'm at my time and I'm gonna stop here. We never did get the slides. Huh?
No, we're working on casting it, so.
You do have them in your
Yeah, they're in your
packet, although not the nice slide that I developed.
I'm looking.
Oh, there we go. Susan's got it up.
I think they all got it.
Oh, excellent.
Everyone's got
Okay.
it. Yeah.
So my question, I think, to you, and I hope we're gonna spend some time on this and then turn it over to hear from our regional partners who are also going to talk about moving forward those recommendations. Given those recommendations, what can the council do? And what can you do with the spheres of influence that you have within your agencies or other partners to help create actionable steps around moving these recommendations forward? So that's sort of my question to you all today.
Got a couple of answers.
Okay, go Peter.
One that we can continue to be a pain about the data and saying we really do need to have a baseline that we can build from. We have to be able to say, this is how many home visitings we have in the state of Oregon in 2025, and our goal is to get to here by 2027.
Yeah.
We can maybe be a pain on that. And the other thing that comes to mind is working with OHA and the CCOs. If a CCO contract 3.0 does get developed, I'm wondering if we have any leverage in getting home visiting as a metric to be measured by the CCOs.
We'll speak to that in a bit.
Okay.
Yeah, and data did come up as a resource request, like the fact that we don't have good data systems. We haven't for the whole time I've been working in home visiting in early childhood. We're trying, so it's one of our evaluation metrics this year is to try to start compiling data. But we need some more investments in the data integration level, I think, but I think.
But the document you produce, it has every county's home visiting.
Yes.
That's a huge breakthrough that we have.
We're really starting to map out what the programs are, where they are.
Other comments on what can we as a council do to implement or have people implement these recommendations? Where is our leverage?
I think I'm gonna build on what Peter is saying, but it's more of a question, like, what can we do? What can we do as a council to, especially across these agency? Can we take these questions and this thinking to react and ask them to grapple with that? Maybe there's, more nuance that we could take to them, Beth, around the barriers across agencies around collecting data, like even if it's just a couple of questions or prompts that you have about how to, the last comment that you made, thinking about that. What would it take from your perspective for the cross-agency participation or support collaboration around data points? If we knew the exact barriers, maybe we can ask the right questions. Because I think at this table, we can ask questions and we can maybe make recommendations, but I don't know. There's other ideas that I have about what our role could be in supporting this support data collection and baseline that Peter brings in.
Well, I think one thing for us to keep in mind is that we're going to have the 4 key agency directors here at 11 o'clock. So I think part of what we can be doing is, as we listen to the presentations, is figure out, so what are we hoping to hear from them, but then what should we be asking them for as far as their support? And it may be having them say to their RUIAC representatives, let's get on this. Good point. Yeah, Subin.
I rarely have ideas for concrete action. I just create problems.
We didn't say that.
When I feel like I have a lot to learn around home visiting, but I do know and have awareness around how the hubs are operating in terms of cross-agency work, and I do know about what the Every Child Belongs Advisory Committee is facing in terms of that. And what I notice in both of those settings is it's one thing to just create the invitation where people come, and whether it's the hub meetings or the advisory committee, getting the key perspectives in the right place. But it's another thing entirely for people to say, I own this piece of work. This is my contribution and the way that how I'm participating. So I like that in the recommendations, you're saying you want to create expectations and timelines, not just an invitation. And so, but I think that's going to be really critical. Like, what are those expectations and is it resourced? Because, there are just so many examples of, we'd like to do all these things, but from within their agency, they may not have the appropriate resources and time to address that. And then similarly, in terms of the system building resources statewide, I've always believed this, that we should be thinking about startup costs versus implementation costs. Like, we should be thinking in a phased approach, because that startup part is just a different set of activities. And so I feel like we should be more precise with our budgets and how we prepare for that. So yeah, I don't know if any of that helped.
None of it.
No, I think that's actually really helpful. And I think this idea of sort of staging and sequencing, because the work that we've been doing in the 4 family regions, and I'm sure the work that you've been doing for a decade or more, you have to start somewhere, but you can't start with the really hard stuff, like bringing people to the table and building relationships is critical. But having an expectation that hubs or partners would come together around some sort of strategic planning for home visiting system coordination, I think could be really important to galvanize some of the work. But having a plan, it's big work, you got to start somewhere. And then strategic planning, and that was something that came up as a specific recommendation, was for state level shared funding plan for home visiting systems. I don't know what that would look like or who would do that, but I would definitely be willing to set tables and bring people together around that.
Well, and aren't you in fact doing that, Beth?
Well, we're working right now with, as I mentioned, did I mention this? Maybe not. that we're working, we have a work group started from our home visiting system advisory group that's contracting with P5 Fiscal Strategies, which is a national consultant, to do a funding and fiscal stream analysis of home visiting. And hopefully, I think the idea is that that report will serve as a foundation of information for folks to come together and then build that funding plan. There is work being done in that regard.
One more thing to add is when I was just listening to you, Beth, when we think about Raise Up Oregon and we think of the action steps from Raise Up Oregon, like we might have a goal in Raise Up Oregon that even talks about cross-sector collaboration around some of these issues, and home visiting is listed so many times in this current version of Raise Up Oregon. Is this something that the council can be paying attention to? Is like the actionable items that come after you make a goal, and then it's like, and then what? And then potentially be able to outline each of the agency's action steps. But they would obviously need to be the ones setting those, but that could be something that the council asks for our specific targeted action steps based on the goals set in Raise Up Oregon. Of course, then the data that goes along with that is going to be, the baseline data will be critical for following, like what we know we're doing the things, listening to the community and what they're asking for. I think it's really important that if you heard loud and clear, we need guidance, but flexibility, we need to listen to that and figure out how do we support those. Done a lot in here.
Been a busy year. Yes, you have done a lot. I mean, this report is just remarkable. As you said, it's a treasure trove of information on what's really happening in the state around home visiting.
I think the key now is taking that information and taking the recommendations and figuring out like who are the right folks to take the next steps. Because we are resource developers and conveners. We can facilitate conversations and engage folks and maybe keep track of the work. But we're, and I think on purpose, outside of the agency partners so that we can be that neutral facilitator. The agency partners at various levels need to be at the table, I think, to really make decisions, create expectations, guidelines.
So Peter, just put you on the spot since you're the co-chair. Is that what your agenda can focus on? What, in 2 weeks, I think the committee meets again, because the agency partners are on your committee. So can we just put that in front of your committee and say, let's see how we can roll this out, but come out of that meeting with some real specifics?
Oh, we actually just met with Peter and Peg earlier this
Yesterday.
yesterday. For that meeting.
This morning?
Yeah, and I think at your recommendation, Sue, we put together a spreadsheet to track the various recommendations, and right now it's all the recommendations and a lot of empty like next steps. So our idea for the next meeting was to sort of take at least 1 or 2 recommendations and workshop them with the committee.
Did we have to ask the council? I can't remember, lost track. We're supposed to ask the council something for the approval for the council for us to, I can't remember what it was.
It was the dear tribal leader. letter.
Yes, yes.
Not today.
No.
Great. That sounds like a super agenda and spreadsheet.
Yeah. Rebuilding there. I'm curious too about the React, but I'm sorry.
And that's probably a Carrie question as much as anything. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a possibility that we could host a home visiting conversation at that meeting. We've done that on topical things that have impacted multiple, so we could engage them in both where are they, but have you come or something like that. So there could be, maybe we could explore what's the target of that conversation versus if there's representation from the agencies at the committee, what's the focus of that, right? Of where they could complement each other or reinforce.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to, I don't even
Yeah.
know like who is on it.
Right,
I think it's
exactly.
Actually.
Yeah.
Who's
so I think
watching.
Right, we could do some comparison on membership.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
presented just briefly, like here
You
when
did,
we
that's
first
right.
started last year, but we haven't come back to
Back.
engage in any kind of deeper conversation.
And Gabby, the other thing I was thinking is they're doing some tracking for us for progress reports. And so one thing I was just thinking about is there information they've already given us on progress connected to home visiting that we might be able to share too.
Mhm.
As a jumping off point for the conversation.
That would be great, so good, I'll
Yeah.
be carrying it.
I'm curious about one of your recommendations, and I remember, I think it was Susan said, like, what is the right role for hubs in this work? Is that maybe that conversation been had with the statewide hub group?
The conversation has been had with hub directors, not with the hub directors as a, in conversation at the same time. So,
And we're actually working right now with, I think we're with Maria and Nancy to come to a meeting. I think your April meeting will have like a half an hour, which isn't
Right,
fast,
right.
but
yeah, those conversations are definitely starting to coalesce in a shared space. I think the role of the hub is a really good question and one that I don't necessarily have an answer for, but it is important, definitely, that the hubs be a part of the solution at least. I don't think you can go into a community and say you need to own this if public health has been owning it for a decade, right? But the hubs definitely need to be part of the solution, actively involved.
and I think that is one of the specific recommendations that we said is that hubs need to be involved, but they don't necessarily have to be taking the lead. Like there are definitely some places where the hub has kind of deferred that home visiting system work to the, usually, I think, local public health. But right now, not all hub directors see that as like part of their work expectations.
Well, and it's a great question because it's interesting timing as the hubs are, deep diving, and Barry's a part of this from her former build hat, into roles and responsibilities and, we are going to be adopting new rules for the hubs in June. So it's a very timely question, Lori. Yeah, and one that we would love to be a part of that conversation in those Tuesday hub meetings. From a council perspective as well as codes. We should coordinate that. You think that's in April?
Yes, we have 30 minutes at the April meeting, I think, and we haven't figured out exactly what the point of not the point, but the goal of that engagement is.
Can it be something as simple as the hubs have responsibility to either be the convener or to make sure the convening is happening? Could be just that simple.
I mean, I don't think I can provide that expectation, but I think
But-
someone
no, we-
could.
but we're in learning council.
I mean, I don't know, I think Jen, you could disagree with me, but it feels like having a conversation with hubs about kind of current goals and what would need, like what was helpful as hub directors to maybe be able to own that statement or implement that statement.
Right. It would be really good to hear from hub directors that don't take the lead. Visiting, what that would mean for them, what would be required for them to step into a role like that. I think that would be important.
So who do you see as the people who need to be at the table to talk about the shared expectations and guidance?
I mean, I think it would be Delk, someone from Delk, someone from OHA, ideally someone from overseas the CCO.
Can you talk louder?
Oh, sorry.
People can't hear it in the back too.
I think just the major state agency partners who are or their key agency staff who are the closest to home visit, which we now have all of those folks, I think, involved at some level in our advisories. Some of them are on our steering committee, some of them are on the committee.
So we could throw that back to one of your advisory committees and say, hey, guys, how about coming out with a draft of what would a home visiting system expectation guidance.
And I'm more familiar with the hub system and the relationship with the developer for the hubs than I am, say, with the relationship of health authority and local public health, which is different. Right? We have some folks here who know something about that. Who can advise us?
And hi, Evan, why don't you pop up front?
Yeah, we're about to switch over. to hands.
I didn't see you come in. Oh, it's okay.
It's disturbing enough already.
disturbing.
But I will say that I think identifying the who within the different agencies is the maybe key next step. Like who are the partners who would come together and maybe work through some shared guidance that could work for their local constituencies, whether it's a child welfare district or a public health.
Well, and you may have the structure set up within COVES, right?
Through the advisory. Yeah,
Right.
not all the right people might be there from all the different agencies, but at least some, most of them, I'm looking back at Kate, like most of the major folks are there.
Okay, well, that was a simple one to take care of.
I could just offer up on the public health. I'm a former county commissioner, so I used to be the public health authority for our county. That OHA's relationship, I would say, is much more prescriptive with their public health than maybe Delk's relationship with hubs. Or hubs are a little bit more squishy and undefined because they're convening. We set up, actually, Gillum County established its public health new authority during COVID. So I have recent experience with it. But with each of those program elements, so like WIC and Babies First, they're very specific about what you need in order to meet those program elements. And it seems like a very maybe easier thing for OHA would be to just say, as part of WIC, you have to be coordinating home visiting because you're already required to provide home visiting. They're monitoring how much staff you have, whether they're qualified, all of those things. So just saying they need to talk to each other is probably the least of what they're being asked to do to provide the service. So I do think that OHA probably has that. And counties are good partners in sort of understanding that they need to follow those.
A lot of places within, at least within the public health programs, there's quite a bit of coordination. And sometimes that also includes coordination with other home visiting that's not operated by public health.
Yeah.
It's more at the service coordination level. Than at the systems level, but that's really helpful to know.
Yeah. And I will say, like, as an example, like one place that I can specifically remember is when we established our public health, like one of the requirements from OHA was that our public health people are also sitting on our local CCO local advice. So they're already sort of in contracts requiring coordination. They just haven't specifically said it has to be around home visiting. So it feels like there's like you could get OHA pretty easily without changing a lot of contract language in it. So you might have a different perspective.
I know.
We're on the other side of what
Yeah.
you're saying. Yeah, right. Well, hey, great to see
Because
everybody.
everyone's capable.
I think I've been around way too long, everybody, whether it's good or not, but. So, you're absolutely right in terms of how it looks on your end, in terms from the county side. There are some, the public health contract is this crazy thing. There's a master contract with every local public health. Within that are all these program elements that are specific to the different parts of work. And so not every county has all of the program elements. The one that touches on home visiting specifically is program element 42. And that's the Title V program element. And so, and it also includes Babies First and Oregon Mother's Care. And that's the one that would have the flexibility to be able to provide, be that convening. And it's really around the Title V work. Every local public health gets to pick what priorities they want to work on, but a lot of times it's used for shoring up home visiting, if they have home visiting in their county. Not every county has, you know, you all were kind of came in, you didn't have it, but you had it. So, but that would be the mechanism around which we could maybe, it's hard to strengthen that language because from the federal side, it's very flexible. And so we could take a look at that and see if we could do a little bit more, or rather than, you know, pushing with the requirement, pulling with that incentive to participate. So the other area where we do have some leverage is with the Family Connects program element pieces, because whoever is the community lead, sometimes it's the hub, sometimes it's local public health. That can be a venue around which we require meeting. And to be quite honest, with the Family Connect work, we require when they provide their application that they talk to each other and that they provide letters of support and they are connected. So we're trying to build that up strong. But it's more carrots than it is requirements.
I'm aware of the time and that we need to probably shift to the panel.
Yes, well, and the panel is right in this conversation. Since you are both, yes, you wear many hats.
So I'm gonna turn it over to Rebecca. Who's gonna-
Great.
Thank you. I'm Rebecca Brown. I'm also at Code. And thanks for having us here today. So our guests are featuring local highlights of home visiting systems, building through collaboration. And we have one panel member on hybrid and 2 here in person. So if we can just ask you each to briefly introduce yourself, your pronouns if you wish, and your organization.
I'm Jennifer Lane, she, her pronouns. I'm the early learning director with Yamhill CCO.
Evan Weaver, he, his pronouns, and I work with Early Learning Washington County, co-director there, also an employee of Washington County Public Health.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Paola Zorrilla Soto. I work for the Early Learning Hub of Central Oregon. I'm a home visiting systems manager. Oh, and my pronouns are she, her, ella.
Thank you so much. So our first question for you, and we'll begin with Evan, is please tell us about one of your biggest successes in using a collaborative approach to improve systems. This could include discussion for collaborative tables you've built for home visiting, goal setting across home visiting programs, or any other.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to name kind of a keystone end state that we've reached, but I'm going to go back and talk about the history of how we got there and some of the ongoing work. And so at this current moment, we have a shared kind of governance structure for our nurse home visiting program. So some things we were already talking about earlier, Babies First, Cocoon, Nurse Family Partnership. That also works with our Healthy Families program, our WIC program, the Family Connects program, as well as our local kind of coordinated entry model, which is called Help Me Grow. They have a shared governance structure. So things that are required for review, whether it's in statute or part of the program model, all come to the same group of people. Also, we built up a parent advisory council. We're just in the first year developing that as part of that model as well. And really provides a lot of shared oversight. So there's efficiency there, right? Instead of having 6 or 7 different advisory structure, you have a single one. It also allows folks who sit at that table to become a lot more well-rounded and educated about the home visiting structure writ large, which I think is really important for people to see the overall system. And over time, what we've kind of also done is built it out to be modular to some degree. So we have a core group that may be looking at really specific technical work. Give you an example, like if we have to do the Healthy Family program, like equity review, right, which can be pretty detailed and thorough. There's a smaller group who's a subset of the governance who looks at that. And then we have broader, more like community of practice style and learning collaboratives that are open to the broader community and don't require the same level of like consistent attendance and engagement. So there's space for people to wax and wane as their interests and their need and the need for them to be there exists. But how we got there is it's not like it took a single year and everyone agreed it was a necessary thing and we made it happen, right? This is built on probably a decade plus of just slow kind of burn around seeing that we were serving the same clientele load. How could we improve things? Lots of conversations about around that workflow that eventually kind of led to this end state. And now where we are is essentially that we're trying to continue to build onto that work by, I think I mentioned having some of these other structures. I run or host an ongoing referral kind of process workflow quality assurance work group that looks at our home visiting programs, but also includes our parenting education hub, our Head Start programs, early intervention, culturally specific agencies will come to that table. And we tend to talk about, we started really very specific around how our referrals going, and what does that look like? And it really quickly broadened into just more surveillance discussion. Like, what are you seeing in your program? What's happening? What's flaring? What's going well? How do we need to address that? Or what do we need to communicate in terms of the current environment? And I'll give you all some specific examples of how that played out. Like there was about 2 years ago, there was a period where we had an influx of refugees coming into the community. They were being directed as soon as they got onto OpenCard, like they were being directed to a specific federally qualified health clinic. And what we found out is that that clinic was basically being saturated to the point where they could no longer take maternal caseload, right? They could not really see pregnant people in a timely fashion. And the reason we found out about it was because our WIC partner and one of our home visiting partners brought it up. And so we went back to our CCOs and had a conversation about we need to redirect where we're making these referrals. And the only reason we're able to do that is because we had this very useful, from the ground to the top. So to me, be able to go have a systemic conversation with somebody and have the relationship to flag it, because we had home visitors having a meeting with a family and finding that stuff out. Another one would be, we understood that there was kind of some misunderstanding about enrollment in early intervention and what to expect in terms of the initial assessment and follow-up. And so that conversation started in that smaller referral team, but then we ended up doing a broader community education session just around that topic that had about 60 different agencies come and participate. And so there's just these little, things that may appear nascent, but then we're able to kind of quickly jump onto them and do what we can. It's not always a resolvable issue, but at least it's something that we can socialize and kind of try and get some traction on. So that's, to me, like one of the biggest things is just having that shared governance and then having some attached structures onto it that allow the work to proceed in an orderly way and allow us to work in close collaboration and continue to just kind of build trust, right? Because we constantly have conversations about where is your capacity? Can you see more families? Where are you at? And then doing messaging with each other to talk about, WIC is really loaded right now. They're a month, 6 weeks out to do appointments. We need to be cautious about when we see families, what we're telling them. Like, yes, we want you to be on these services. Yes, we need you to be in there and we want you to be in there, but please understand, staff only has so much capacity. And I think that just helps breed a level of familiarity and trust across the agencies as well as with the families that we're working with.
Thank you so much.
So, quick question. So who houses this group? Is it public health or which hat?
Yeah, it is public health, but it is also the hub, because our structure is unique because not only is my hub a partnership between United Way and the Washington County Health and Human Services, I wear both hats all the time, right? I'm wearing the early learning hub hat and I'm wearing the public health hat. If I'm being as direct as I can, I would say it sits more on the public health side than it does in the hub side. But I think a lot of things we've been able to get to, from investments in the Help Me Grow model we have to applying the Family Connects initially. Like, I remember writing a letter when we applied to Family Connects, and we applied as a hub and a public health. Like it was a joint application. So we have unique structural benefits, right, that allow us to do some of this stuff. But I would say we have hub staff who do like coordinated enrollment for Preschool Promise come to that referral meeting. So we try and integrate in our parenting hub, which is more, again, part of the early learning hub than it was traditionally public health, is there talking about parenting education and how that supports our home visiting programs. So even if you said Evan's just public health and we're looking at it in that lens, we're still trying to wrap our arms around pieces of the hub work to be there where it makes sense. Is that?
Yeah, thank you. That's exactly what I was wondering.
Thank you so much. Paula, would you go ahead and lead?
Yes, sure. So our success is based on developing and improving relationships between the hub, home visiting partners, and medical providers through the implementation of Family Connect in Central Oregon. It is crucial to emphasize that the idea of implementing Family Connect came from the Central Oregon Home Visiting Collaborative. They work together to strengthen the home visiting system. The role of this collaborative aligns with my current role as a home visiting system manager. Part of it began last year with a free 2-day training about infant massage available to all home visitors in Central Oregon. The work will continue with a new home visiting steering committee. These are perfect opportunities for our home visiting partners to foster and improve relationships. Family Connects is a universal nurse-based home visiting program for all families with newborn babies. There are no requirements to receive a visit. In partnership with local health departments, the Early Learning Hub was one of the early adopters, and our Family Connect site was one of the 2 Tri-County sites at that time. Before implementation, the hub presented Family Connects across the region to prepare the terrain. Then, through our connections in the medical field, we were invited to different OBGYN and pediatric provider meetings. One of these meetings with COIPA, a provider association with over 700 members, offered us a monthly ad in their newsletter, a benefit that Family Connect still uses. Hub's relationship with St. Charles Birthing Center, the main one in the region, helped us to obtain a daily list of patients at the center, access to recruiting families, and a presentation by Dr. Hoffman for their continuing medical education program. This was only possible thanks to the collaboration of Healthy Families, the Shutes County Health Department, the Birthing Center management team, and our OHA consultant at that time. It is essential to mention that during all these meetings, the hub mission was clear: to bring out the best in home visiting partners and the systems. It wasn't about the programs, but about offering the best of us to the families in our community. Since Family Connect was available in Central Oregon, we heard some comments from home visiting partners about how Family Connect will steal their clients, or because of this program, the numbers of visits will decrease. This misinformation made some partners believe that Family Connect would make client recruitment harder. However, this is not how Family Connect should function in any community. Part of the program is to send referrals to various community services, including home visiting programs. We began addressing this misunderstanding with an invitation to home visiting partners to present their programs at our regional case conference. It helped the Family Connect team and the invitees to increase their knowledge about the differences between programs, program requirements, and the best way to make referrals. It also allowed the participants to ask clarifying questions and make connections. After that, asking them to become Family Connect CAP members was simple and successful. Our regional CAP meetings were an ideal space for partners to learn more about Family Connect's implementation, future goals, and current referrals, number of visits, see the benefits of having a Family Connect site in the region, and find ways to contribute to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Paola. Wow. Central Oregon is once again a star. I mean, they have so many programs that just really resonate. And I do have to say, every time I hear about people competing for children, my mind kind of goes in crazy places. So, but I know it happens, and it's not just in home visiting. I know it's in a variety of realms that we deal in, but I still find that astounding. So collaboration helps.
Yeah, it's amazing to see the great collaboration to sort out those misunderstandings. Okay, so if we can turn to Sharon.
So our home visiting program in Yamaha County is called Family Core. It started out as Family Coordinated 0 to 5 Referral Exchange. That's how we got the core.
We've since dropped that, but that's where that idea came from. It was developed in 2013 by a bunch of home visiting directors that were meeting in a coffee shop. Before the CCO, before the hub, they were like, we need to simplify this system. It's too complicated for our providers to understand all the different programs, who's got capacity and how to get them in. We just need to simplify it. So the coffee shop and moved it into public health a couple of years. And then once the CCO got up and running and then the hub got up and running, then it was moved in to the hub. The primary components of our family core is a shared referral. Everybody in the community uses the same referral form, whether they're medical providers, DHS, anybody that's referring into home visiting. We have an MOU that clarifies roles and responsibilities of all parties. We have a BAA so that we can share HIPAA protected information between programs. We have shared marketing strategies and resource materials. We have a weekly coordinators meeting with all the home visiting programs to look at the individual referrals that come in. We have a monthly directors meeting. We have periodic retreats for things like strategic planning and such. We're doing one in a couple weeks, actually. And we have 3 times a year, we have home visitor network trainings and professional development events. And we have a dedicated FTE, not me. I mean, I do obviously do some work on this, but we have full-time staff dedicated to this family core work.
Nice.
And sidebar note, not in my notes, but I did want to reiterate that that cost me way more than I get for it. So just so you're aware that the money that goes into what we do is well more than I get from my McPhee contract. So I'm creating all sorts of funding, the CCO supports, philanthropy dollars, all sorts of things. One of the programs that we're really proud of is our Children's Champion program. And this is something that we do because we're embedded in the CCO. We really wanted to encourage providers to refer into the home visiting programs. And so we started the Children's Champion program. And so all of the APM clinics that are contracted through the CCO have a requirement to send a representative to the Children's Champion program, which happens once or twice a year. It was happening twice a year before COVID and then stopped for a couple of years. And now we're picking it back up again. And what we do in those Children's Champions meetings is just help the medical providers understand the family support services that are available and then help them integrate it into their workflows. So that's the important partnership with the CCO is that workflow piece, because we can go and do a presentation. Here's the family core, here's how it benefits your families. But if they can't work it into their workflows during well child visits, it's not going to go very far, right? So that was the important connection there. We recently started embedding that within the PC3 collaborative. It's an existing meeting that these clinics have anyway, because they're extremely busy and we didn't want to ask them to come to yet another meeting. So we just worked with our health services team to integrate that into the PC3 collaborative. Our most recent one, we discussed the social, emotional, and behavioral health resource guide that we created as part of our social emotional metric work. So we went over that with them and made sure they're aware of that and then brought it back to family core and how we can help families get connected to all these resources. And it's also part of our CCO site visits. When the medical director and his team go and do clinic visits, they go twice a year, and at least once a year, they will call out family core and make sure everybody knows how to get to that.
Thank you so much. So before we go into our second question, we'd like to see if any questions.
All right. Questions, Susan?
Is it fair to say for all of the stories that we heard, that slow burn that you were talking about, coffee shop meetings, that was a necessary ingredient for all of this to happen? And my comment is, what can we do to create conditions like that in regions where we don't see as much activity? How do we force that issue, right? Because some of these things were, I don't want to use the word serendipitous, but like it was, people gathering around a common issue or something like that. So that's I don't know who I'm talking to.
I'm
talking to everyone.
I can make an attempt at it. I think you're right in that there is serendipity there, and also, you know, I think something that we often don't give enough credit to is individuals and leadership matters a lot, right? Which is why we see things can change when you have turnover in organizations. Relationships matter, and how people develop those relationships tend to matter, and so it is hard to like force things sometimes. I will say that some of the ideas that have been brought up today around, you know, trying to emphasize it through public health contracts, utilizing Family Connects, community alignment, like there are some other structural mechanisms that I do think would be helpful that we didn't have back then necessarily. And then to the point around resourcing, I think, which we'll get to later, when there isn't a financial incentive or it doesn't feel like you're in a scarcity mindset, right? That can also help embolden those conversations. Because I think a lot of times people feel like they would like to have them, but either A, coming back to the comment about like your payment is tied to a count of who you're serving, right? And or this stuff takes capacity to do. And if it's not innate in you as like an organizational leader to kind of build those relationships and develop them, having the capacity to do that as seen as part of your job and having the time to do it, then I think can relieve the cortisol that goes into people's brains and opens up some of those spaces. So that would be my kind of thinking about.
I would agree. I think adequately resourcing it is really critical. Just adding one more thing to things that people are already doing without the funding to like a staff person to take it on, is just, it's just going to cause resentment. So it's important to fund what we mandate.
Paula, would you like to add anything in answer to that around building relationships over time?
Yeah.
Might not have heard too. Okay. Paula, would you like to add anything to that response around the work that goes into building relationships over time?
Yes. I was thinking about, well, again, money, resources, right? We had this infant massage training and we are doing another training this year. And okay, we are focusing on workforce and how we can bring tools, education, etc., but also in their relationships. So those 2 days that we were there for 8 hours each day, including meals, etc., was amazing. I mean, you were able to see that there weren't programs there, but people, human beings interacting to each other. And then when questions were asked about their clients, they, of course, share information about their clients and their experiences, but they also share information about their personal life. I mean, this is happening with my kid, with my mom. I have seen this with my aunt or whatever. So you could see those relationships that are so important for us to keep building and do something better and be there for the families when they need us or when they need support, etc. So creating those spaces so we can actually cultivate those relationships that are so important. And I think that so many times we think that we can work in silos, but that's not the reality, that it's not benefiting or helping our families and our communities.
A follow-up comment, which is, and that I love that in all of your stories, there was some element of people gathering just to learn about something, right? And those types of events can lead to, well, that was great information. What do we do? What's our plan? And that naturally leads into the meetings, the retreats, those types of things. And so that is something that's structural that we can create, you know. I'm normally not a fan of conferences and things like that, but it's like, maybe we need a conference and like having those types of convenings where people can learn together. And we see the benefit of that when we do our retreats and get together and do those informal things. And it's the in-between the session conversations that, you know, lead to relationship building. So.
Yeah, I know we have to move on, but I give a really specific example of how it's playing out right now. Like on multiple fronts, I have different programs have been working to get Circle of Security to come to an in-person training for like years now, right? And we finally got them to, they're working on it and they've been thinking and then they agreed they're gonna do it. Within me finding out they were gonna do it, and just internal within like the public health and hub, I know we have like 30+ people who already wanna go. And then when I've been having just occasional conversations with some other folks in different programs, they also are like, oh, they're coming, we want to send a bunch of staff. So to your point, even if it's a conference or if it's a shared professional development opportunity that touches a lot of the home visiting section, and then it creates this really strong pull, not just for programmatic lead staff to be there, but for line staff to be there. And that's a place where the state can leverage dollars and have kind of events that not only bring people together for the purpose of collaboration, but then delivering something that they need programmatically or that they value really highly. And so I think looking for those kinds of opportunities is another way to kind of make that happen.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Question for you, Jen. You mentioned that you've got a marketing strategy and materials. So are those something that could be shared or applied to other areas?
Potentially, the CCO paid for us to do some work with Mass Staff Collective. They built us a website and created a bunch of materials and we did some messaging. Spent 4 months, maybe a little more than that, on this with the team. So I would certainly be happy to share with you what we've done, and then I can check the fine print on the contract.
So is this to market to the provider community to build a collaborative, or is it to market to the community saying everyone should have a home visit?
It's both. So we have a two-prong approach. We do the parent engagement, which is a lot of outreach events. We host 2 community baby showers every year. We do a lot of parent-facing work, especially in the summer. And then we have agency outreach, where that staff person I was talking about goes out into all the agencies and does the rounds and drops off rat cards and asks to present at staff meetings and does all sorts of things like that. So, and she does the rounds in the community and then starts over. She's hitting them all about every 6 months. So.
Wow. Okay, yeah, that'd be great, because we talked about messaging forever, right? And I don't know that Phelps done anything about that through HFO, or I don't know, Robin, your pilots? Or,
I think Beth and the team could speak to what the regions have been doing, because you've been working with the regions, the 4 funded regions, and they have each their own communication approach. But what it makes me think of is going back to the landscape and the real recommendations around a unified statewide communication about home visiting that's agnostic to any model. I wonder if pulling these great examples in community of how they've done that, then a committee could look at that and say, okay, here's how the community has been doing it. Is there something that we can pull from all of that that would be a one message from, and maybe all of the state agencies could agree on, yes, that looks like something we could all get behind, and then that could be a unified message to everyone, which would, I would hope, enhance what the local communities are doing, and yet offer up a sort of unified marketing campaign, it seems. Yeah.
I fear we're gonna violate that.
Yeah, that's
So with our Family Connects money, we have hired a contractor. The same contractor, you may have seen the Rethink the Drink campaign that's been kind of statewide. It's the same firm that's doing a marketing campaign for Family Connects specifically. But with that said, it is a universal touch point. And so I haven't seen the creatives yet. They're getting them finally tested with the audiences, but I hear that they are really fabulous and could really, it's around Family Connects, but it talks about the greater good of having visiting. So we'll see what happens with that. But this is our first push, because sites really need a push to get going in this communication. But
in the advocacy group that we're part of has a 1-pager that's been developed. visiting too.
I just piggyback off, just in a general observation, when we were at our retreat, we had talked, the RUACT really, I think, is partnering around policy. But what I see that's missing is that same level of partnership among the communicators in your agencies. So, you know, everyone has their own silo and they're getting together around the policy, but there doesn't seem to be unless I'm like, correct me if I'm just not aware of it, a similar mechanism where the communications directors, the marketing people are actually sitting around and saying, how do we speak as the state of Oregon with a unified voice around early childhood? Because it feels like for home visiting and for other things that the state's working on, that's a way for agencies not to be at cross purposes in their communications, or just promoting their one piece of home visiting or their one piece of housing or whatever that might be. So I just wanted to sort of offer up as a general idea that maybe that's the next iteration of Raise Up Oregon, is having communications folks who are regularly coordinating and convening.
And more than communication, the data as well, right? That's such a big part of the RUACT is that data dashboard. And so having people who are already kind of in that world, right? And they're the ones kind of helping on that, I think. Yeah, just to add.
I'm gonna come back to Kate, your comment, just if there is a moment in time before the Family Connects approach, it goes out for you and others that are involved in the home visiting to kind of just take an extra look at it, because it might be a missed opportunity if it doesn't feel like it reflects more of the whole field. If it's promoting Family Connects, which we all agree is a Oregon universal home visiting, but at a time when we're trying to break down silos and have less competition, it may miss the mark if we don't have like people agreeing on that at that moment. But it could be a really catalyst for what we are looking for right now in terms of relationship with the crops. So it just feels like a really.
And it's not the end, it's the starting point. Because as we know, it's home visiting is not one and done, right? It's a continual process. And so we'll be continuing the communications work as we go forward. So I think we'll do our best to see if we can pause for just a moment and share what's coming, and know that there are opportunities to actually do some adjustments as well.
So good. I mean, to have the resource of funding dedicated to messaging is amazing. So like, to build on that as much as possible would be.
Yeah, because I do think, I totally appreciate what you're saying. And when you get down to the nuts and bolts, this is where we kind of run into problems, is, there's, where do the resources come to support that? And how do we come up with something that really touches all the lenses that come into that group? It's not impossible, but it's what we grapple with a lot.
And then Sue, can I continue? I just want to thank the regional examples of working together, because I think all of us can learn from what you end up doing locally, where you're building relationships and you're rolling up your sleeves and you're like, okay, we're going to meet at coffee. We're going to get to know each other. And we have families and we have dogs and cats and chickens and care about the same thing. And so I think always looking to you to show everyone how to do collaboration. And so I just really want to commend you for that work. And the shared professional development, the Ford Families Foundation's regional home visiting work that we've invested in, one specific goal and strategy was shared professional development, because of what you are illustrating and talking about and describing, which is when you get people together and they learn together, they get inspired together, they build relationships, and they want to work together on the common vision of supporting families. And it becomes about families, not about my family's, your family's funding, which always gets in the way because we all have to feed our families. But I just really appreciate how you described so well how shared professional development can be a catalyst. And there is not always equity across models of how much funding is available for professional development. And so when you come together and say, we all want circle of security, what could it take to do that? It just makes everybody better. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, if we can transition into our second question, and we'll be starting with Paola. Please, given the recommendations from the Early Childhood Home Visiting Landscape Report, what would you see as a good next step council to do to strengthen state support for regional home visiting?
Okay, more centralized and coordinated systems for accessing early childhood home visiting. Unite Us Connect Oregon offers a good platform to send, receive, and track referrals. It helps organizations to be consistent when working with referrals. Unfortunately, they didn't have all the organizations or programs we send referrals to in their network. Any platform or software that could help us bridge some of the gaps in a referral process must have most agencies, ideally all, in their network. In addition to this, having to log in into another platform only to send or receive referrals would add another layer of work to a team. A better solution would be to have the option to make referrals through the platform we are currently using to enter data related to our clients. Platforms are not the only problem. There is also a knowledge gap. Staff needs to be better prepared to make appropriate referrals. Knowing at least the basics about another available home visiting program only brings adverse outcomes for families and decreases the probability for partners to provide essential services. Oftentimes, it is noticed that programs can provide services because families who were referred to a program don't meet the requirements. Another example is the families were contacted in a language they don't speak, which forces them to not follow up or call back because of the language barrier and makes a referral unsuccessful. The other one would be addressing financing and resource needs to support the early childhood home visiting system change. Implementing a program is complicated. If we add to that the insufficient funds, we are making it harder for sites. I frequently hear from other home visiting sites how Family Connect visiting sites how they struggle to afford things to promote their program. Because we could use funds, money was never a concern. We were definitely mindful of spending funds, but money wasn't a barrier when planning ways to spread the word about Family Connect. Hub funds covered part of my salary and other staff, but we took advantage of the branded items the Hub acquires for outreach event, and also we had our team members here that were promoting and spreading the word about Family Connect at the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Paola. Jen, can you please add to that? What next steps would you hope for this?
Sure. So Peter, you talked about the role of CCOs in this work.
Yeah.
Or what could their role be? Well, we happen to put forward a bill this year, Senate Bill 695, sponsored by Senator Reynolds and several other bipartisan legislators that does exactly that. So I would love to encourage your support for that bill.
Yeah.
This one pager in your handout talks about the bill, just high level, highlighting some key points in that. The point of this bill is to really focus CCOs around a common issue, and that common issue is maternal health and early childhood. And so this bill calls out increasing access to housing, behavioral health, and perinatal care for pregnant people and new parents. It has a focus on health equity and outcomes. It requires the CCOs to invest a portion of their incentive funding in maternal health and early childhood initiatives. It requires them to track health equity metrics related to pregnancy and early childhood, like maternal mortality and developmental screenings.
all the CCOs would be required to develop a local maternal health model that would give pregnant people access to behavioral health and home visiting services as part of their OB care. And it requires CCOs to collaborate with hubs in the development of their community health improvement plans. We don't anticipate a fiscal impact on the state. The funding is already out there. It's just requiring CCOs to go further upstream. Partner more with the hubs and invest in early childhood. And
You should put my omnibus button on now.
yes, exactly.
And I believe the hearing on that was yesterday, right?
It was, yes.
Yeah. Mhm. So testimony can be put in until 1 o'clock tomorrow.
Gabby, is this one in our list that you're tracking for us?
Yes, it's one that we're tracking for the Early Childhood Coalitions list. So yeah, you'll find that on that tab to the council tracker.
Thank you, Jen. And Evan, if you can share.
So Kevin, just a quick question. Did your CCO, are they the ones who asked Reynolds to submit that?
We let them know.
Awesome.
You got a great CCO.
Tell us to do something, all right. Thanks, Jeff.
Well, I think I've heard the council talk about it a lot already today, which is around sequencing and leveraging existing investments. And so that's kind of my first really emphasis, is to look at the landscape really thoroughly and understand where there already has been a substantial amount of investment put into the system and what are those impacts. And so I'll give you all some specific examples to think through, like how you in a cross-agency way can think about some of these issues. First, Family Connects, which I'm really closely connected to as an early adopter site, and I'm going to be the incoming chair of the advisory committee for Family Connects. I think we need to really look at the sites that are implementing, how that's driving utilization of home visiting and other related services. I think I've said this before to folks on this panel, like I have a bit of a fear of us recreating the push for developmental screening and not having the co-commitment resources around early intervention. And so I think we need to really think about, as we invest in this universal touch point that we want to have hospitals and OBs and pediatricians pushing into, we don't want to create a benefits cliff where it's like, great, we saw you for these 2 visits or 3 visits and you have substantial risk issues that we'd like to follow up on, but we don't have the capacity to follow through with you, right? So I think that's one thing that I would call out, is there's a risk reward scenario there that we have to be very, very mindful of, especially given how some of the home visiting programs are currently funded. They're not really funded in a way to match enrollment, right? And so that's something we need to be mindful about. The other piece is we've seen substantial investment around the 1115 waiver, so the health-related social needs. I think, how do we leverage home visiting and related early childhood services to play a bigger role in that? Whether it's WIC, whether it's our Healthy Families program, whether it's the nurse home visiting programs, how do we make it a more streamlined process for them to kind of direct benefits for the families? I know that kind of plays out CCO by CCO, but if taking a more universal approach into streamlining that could be really beneficial. Social emotional child level metric, there's opportunities there to do more claims-based work, I think, for home visiting programs. There's technical issues there that need to be untangled that we're currently looking at, but I think there's opportunity there to do some really interesting and important work that would also keep it potentially off of state general fund, so it doesn't have this big legislative ask next to it. Granted, I say this with an asterisk going on with what's being discussed around Medicaid currently at the federal level, but you can only do what you can do. And then I think looking at integration with like ODHS money they have to support their families. We're looking at doing a pilot based on what happened in Eastern Oregon to expand Healthy Families offering to folks who may be at risk of being in child welfare. So I think there's some opportunities to look at there. And then within some other areas, you could look at how WIC could be supportive of lactation support, maybe leveraging things like in lieu of service agreements with CCOs or other ways of expanding that technical capacity out to the broader community. And then beyond that, so that's like, where are we investing? Where are there roadblocks to there being cross-pollination and support in the current ecosystem? We talked about it earlier. I think the base funding, just for like every community having a base level funding that's substantive for coordination is really important. And I would say everyone, because, well, some of us may have some of that funding currently. A lot of it is ad hoc, and there's no guarantee that it's going to be here next fiscal year, right? Like I have county general fund that supports some of it. I can tell you, we're having significant budget discussions in our county right now. And so I think if you risk just looking site by site about who has it now, you create the environment is stable. And if we're able to maintain those investments and we get additional base funding, all it does is allow us to continue to drive forward progress and continue to be innovators. And maybe we're coming back to this table in a few years' time talking about what's the next iteration around coordinated visiting. So those are the things that I would kind of call out for potential next steps.
So we'd like to take about 20 minutes for discussion if you have one question.
I have a question. How are you guys, first of all, I'm really impressed with what you guys have been doing locally and kind of wish that there was more of that in my region. But families move to different counties. How, or have you thought about how you coordinate or help families who are moving into a new jurisdiction, moving to your neighbor county, and making sure that those services are still there for families, that they're not moving into a new community and then having to restart the process of figuring out who to call? Have you done work in that space, and what does that look like?
We have not formally done work in that space. We know our partners, right? So there is occasionally phone calls that happen, but there's not a formalized process yet.
Yeah, Metro Region, it's program leadership knowing each other and making sure that line staff is supporting when transfer happens, because it's not like mass migration where you see a big block of people moving. To your point, like one of the things that we're really interested in was how do we serve specific populations that maybe have a small footprint in one county, but as a region, the footprint is substantial, and how do you resource that and get FTE? I'll give you an example. Like if we know that there's a large Somali speaking population, but it's very difficult to dedicate FTE to that Somali speaking population just in Washington County or just in Multnomah or just in Clackamas. Is there a way to do like regional teamsing work where we can cross fund and do more culturally specific work? Because that's typically where we see it the most, is like, how do you get at some of these populations where as an individual organization or program, it doesn't make a lot. You can't really make the case to serve that population based on the population statistics, but regionally we could, because when you look at Washington County as a specific example, our demographics are such that you have white and Hispanic as like, two dominant groups in this long tail of a ton of other ethnicities and languages that we still want to serve, but building capacity to do that individually is very, very difficult.
I was thinking about us. I cannot think of a home visiting partner that doesn't offer services regional, because again, we are Central Oregon. We are 3 counties. So most of us, we are offering services in the 3 counties, though we don't have an office there, and then on a side. But then thinking about the health departments, 3 different counties, 3 different health departments, that they do have really good relationships, especially in that maternal area. So I don't think that they have problems if they have to share information about someone they know is moving.
Thanks, Paula. Other comments as well as questions from council? And I think one of the things that strikes me is that we've heard from all 3 of our panelists some specific steps that could be taken. And some of them, seem to be Coves directed. Sorry, Beth. And some may be for, a table that's not yet set. But I think one of the things that I'd like to have people reflect on, and probably after this meeting, is with these recommendations, and some of them are very specific and which is super helpful, obviously. Where does the next step land? Is it in one of the Cove's advisory committees? And last I saw in your org chart, I think there are 3 or 4 of them. Great, you're down to 3. So is it in one of the Cove's advisory committees? Is it in the council's home visiting system committee that Peter and Peg, co-chair? Is it at RUIACT? And I think RUIACT is coming front and center more and more in these conversations, and probably working with our state partners to see who's at the RUIACT table, right, Gary?
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to sort it out so that we don't just leave this conversation saying, we learned a lot. Which is certainly true for me, but yeah. So Beth and Carrie too, from a RUIACT standpoint, I'd be really interested in thinking through where do some of these issues land.
Yeah, I'm really curious to understand more about the role of the RUIACT, because I feel like I haven't had a lot of touch points with that group other than back in the day, like doing some dashboard work on the data side and one presentation, I think, with that group. Because it seems like if that's the group that is bringing together cross-agency partners for implementation, right? I mean, of Raise Up Oregon, that makes a lot of sense. And figuring out who is in that group, who's maybe already part of our home visiting advisories and who's not, or and where's the right table. Like, we don't want to keep creating more groups. But what can we do within the groups that already exist, like RUIACT?
Well, and I was thinking about some of Liz's remarks about, you start to categorize things as what's policy, what's data, what's community engagement, what's communication or messaging, and which kinds of strategies are appropriate for which tables. So like Kate and I might be able to like connect and say, okay, as we think about the membership at RUIACT around policy and around tracking the implementation of Raise Up Oregon, of these recommendations, which ones make the most sense to at least start there to kind of figure it out, right? It represents all 6 state agencies. And so if 3 of the state agencies, it makes sense for the 3 state agencies, but there's some membership either overlap with the other 2, or if there's very distinct different membership, then I think the either coordination or which conversation is right for which table is some work we could do together. Kate, was that kind of where you were coming from too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like
Yeah.
the distinguishing between sort of policy and other kinds of
Strategies.
strategies. I think that's going to be really important. And then I think about crosswalking that maybe with we've been working on our theory of action, which really kind of maps out like what are the 5 areas of systems building, and then at the state level, like digging into what are the things that need to happen. Some of those are policy, some of those are not.
Right.
Some of them have to do with softer things like helping regions to put together like either shared learning opportunities or build collaborative tables that involve home visiting if they haven't. And we can play some role in that, maybe in partnership with the regional folks that are leaders in that group in the area, without adding more work to it, of course.
Yes, I think one of the things that Jen said that really I keep playing it over my head is that it sounded like what you said was you went to the providers, medical providers, figured out how to integrate in this work into their workflow. So it didn't feel like you were asking in addition. Maybe it's a form they're already filling out, you added a box, or I'm not sure what you did, but it felt like you integrated into their workflow. It didn't feel like additional work, even though there might be branches.
It is a separate form. And we've tried to like get them to go online and listen, but no, they relay like faxes. And we're like, okay, fax it away. Whatever works for you.
Yeah, that part's good. Right. Other comments about where we go from here?
Just on your process question, to me, it would be great if either an advisory committee or RUAC or both came forward with recommendations to our home visiting committee, which we could vet and bring to the council. It seems like that would be some steps that could be taken. Process to follow. And if we can set a timeline for that same, it'd be great if we could focus on that for, I think the next home visiting committee we have after this current one is in May. So maybe we can set that, like, but by the May home visiting committee, could we have recommendations from the WAC and or an advisory committee on specific things the councils can do?
How's that sound to?
I think that sounds good. I think the issue would be like, and I always come back to this, like systems building is big, you guys know this. What's the priority? Like, where's the best starting? You know, we, I think, heard some of those and they came up in our recommendations. But I think it would be, we have not, we've talked with the committee, we've talked with now you all a little bit, though we didn't go into everything. I feel like to really engage the local regional workers would be great to get some, like, which one you think we should start from the state level? Where's the starting point? Is it community awareness and coming together around that, or is it shared guidance, or like, it's always hard to prioritize, but there's so much work to be done if we could just like focus in. And I think to Subin's question, right, on staging and sequencing, we can continue to build. I mean, part of what we are charged with doing is trying to bring together folks to share for shared understanding around home visiting. And that's ongoing forever work. But then these things that are specific across looking at policy, looking at contracts for hubs for local public health, like, is that the place to start? And I would welcome input. I don't feel like that's not our decision to make. That needs to.
I was just looking at the first recommendation with the state level cross agency expectations. That would be huge. Right there. And it's set up with all.
We heard that a lot from
695
partners,
passes, then
that
parties-
would be
parties on a
helpful.
recommendation.
Helpful starting point, just this expectation, who should be involved and that the work should happen at some level. How do you guys feel about that?
Yeah, I agree. I think that's critical.
I guess my question goes to what's the strategic imperative of the council, right?
Right.
Is it about building a base and going from there, or are there certain key areas that you really want to, beyond base building, that you really want to dig into? Like, I was thinking about this earlier, like the pain points that get talked about around competing for families. I think about that here and coordinated enrollment, like what drives that competition? It's not just funding, as I wrote this down earlier. Some of this stuff is not solvable by us. It may take the state requesting to national orgs to do innovation and adoptions of their evidence-based models to reduce the stress, right? Like, can we allow families to enroll later in this program or extend this program out? And then that makes the system a lot more flexible and being responsive to the community's needs. And so I think the question I would have for y'all is what is the one or two things you want to accomplish in the short term, and then that would drive the next steps that need to be looked at really critically, and what are the individual dials that have to be turned a little bit.
Our current work plan priorities are around sort of our continuing to compile data and information, because I think that has been in our work with regions really important to show you don't need to be competing with each other for families, because there's lots of families out there. Bringing that data to the table, but being able to say, look, we've got all these families out there and only this percentage are getting home visiting. So we're working on that. We're working on the financing piece, like, because that is so fundamental. So doing this fiscal streams analysis, I think, will be helpful, but it's going to take a while for that to happen. But these other pieces to support regional implementation and bringing partners together around that is where I tend to look to hub directors, but then we know how critical it is to bring in those other partners. And that's what hub directors say, right? We can bring them to the table, but we can't really make them play unless their state level folks are telling them that they should at least come into the sandbox. So maybe that is good for the system.
Well, and Peter, I appreciate your comment that you know, maybe we do ask React, and I think they meet next week.
Yeah, Friday, we're working on rescheduling, so either Friday or the next Friday,
Oh,
within the next 2 weeks.
Okay, before the committee home visits. So maybe there can be some coordination. I don't know, your advisory committee schedule.
The other priority that I think comes up, and it is a place where people tend to be, it seems like, from what we learned, a place where people can come together is like where Family Core started, which is bringing programs together to help improve access to services, so that more service coordination piece. And there's some interesting models across the country of how they have had not like a central intake for the whole state, but at least some central statewide touch point that then if you did statewide messaging, could be like, all right, all doctors and nurses across the state, if you don't know where to go for this is the number to call, or all families go here. And then it kind of it connects out to the regional places where they know there's a Family Core in Yamhill County, or there's Community Uplift in Douglas County. So that is another, just to raise another thing that seems like potentially a place that could benefit from some cross-agency policy. I don't know, Carrie, I'm looking, is that policy, or I know we've done Help Me Grow, we've done 211, and those things are somewhere. But I mean, to Evan's point, you have Help Me Grow, but it takes a lot of work locally to help Me Grow staff know about home visiting in order to make referrals.
Well, yes and no. I mean, because that was, our local team was built on the Healthy Family Screening. So there's a lot of integrated knowledge on, and they also do orphan mothers care. So it's really, that team is hyper integrated. And so they're funded by about 12 different funding streams. We're actually trying to consolidate. But having a team that's knowledgeable about what's available in the screening requirements makes a huge difference. To your point, I think, yeah, having conversations on what makes it easy on the medical side is also another interesting conversation from like EMR utilization. And I think that Family Connects comes back into some of that, like we've been able to do some things with Providence that, you know, in Care Oregon, like we get all the Care Oregon birth referrals now. And so like that, those kind of big universal steps also make a huge difference in simplifying things.
And Family Connects is such a great opportunity for something.
I know we have 2 council members who are on the screen joining us virtually, both of whom have been very involved in home visiting in different respects. So Peg, do you want to make comments, and then Ruby?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for the presentations. And I think in working with the Home Visiting Systems Committee, you know, one of our mandates was to have state guidance, but local kind of control and coordination. And I think we don't want to lose sight of that because it is just like Jen said, in Yamhill County, this all started with people going out to coffee. I think those are the local folks, regional folks are the ones that know each other. And we have to take advantage of those relationships. I agree that we need some certainly financial support and technical support for that. But I think each region probably knows best what works for them and how they work best together and aligning. And I know it's much easier in the smaller counties like Yamhill that to have everybody know, that is everybody sort of involved with making the referrals, know about what programs are available. But I think that's also an advantage, probably more difficult in larger counties. But I appreciate all the innovation, and I don't think it's a one size fits all. I think it's going to be different in each region. And we have to respect that.
Thanks, Peg. And Ruby.
Thank you. Yeah, I will just echo what Peg said. I agree with that. And that's a tricky piece, right? But I appreciate sort of the work. I mean, obviously it was planned this way, right? The state level work, the regional work. But it seems like the work that Coves is doing with the hubs and sort of trying to align a little bit but make it flexible is also a big lift, right? But some of the things that sorry, who was it? That Evan was mentioning, sorry, Evan, about how we think strategically and sort of connecting all of these dots, and really appreciate bringing forth sort of that lens of what are all the things in the background that we should be thinking about and connecting with, right? And I think Beth made that point as well. And engaging folks, but not having authority, what does that mean? And to me, again, that points to those very local relationships that Peg is talking about, but also these system-wide relationships. So I appreciate that work, and thinking about how RUACT can sort of support some of these concepts as well is really wonderful. I don't know how that happens, but I'm glad that we're having the conversation. So I appreciate that as well.
Thanks, Ruby. Ruby has been on the home visiting system committee. She is needing to just rotate off of that. So thank you, Ruby, for helping launch this whole effort, as well as staying. All right, I think we are out of time. Yes, yeah, we will move on to Dana, who's
Thank you so much.
Very, very much. And Paula, thank you for joining us from Central Oregon. We appreciate your comments today, but we really appreciate the work you're doing.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yep, thank you. And Dana, we want to welcome you very much. I think everybody knows Dana Hepper. She's basically, I look at you as kind of our lobbyist over there, but without officially being that. So Dana, thank you for joining us today. And we're very appreciative of the role that you and the Children's Institute are playing in this advocacy group now. So
yeah,
thanks.
Great, thank you. Sorry, thank you, Sue. Good morning. My name is Dana Hepper, and I'm the Director of Policy and Advocacy at the Children's Institute. And yeah, we have been privileged this year to receive a small grant from the Oregon Community Foundation to convene the Home Visiting Partnership. And that home visiting partnership, that advocacy effort that Sue is alluding to, is what I'm here to update you all on today. So, last year, partners identified a need to coordinate advocacy efforts related to home visiting through the 2025 legislative session. We were just finding that legislators, maybe we lost some folks who understood home visiting. We've been, missing Peter Buckley in that seat, for example. And it was time for us to rebuild our bench of legislators who understand the powerful strategy that home visiting is for families and communities. And so it was time to pull all of our home visiting advocates back together to create a coordinated strategy. So once we received the grant from Oregon Community Foundation, we entered into a contract with Kara Copeland from Stately Pine Consulting. Many of you may know Kara as well. She has a strong background in home visiting, having most recently led the Oregon Association of Relief Nurseries, that are entities that both do home visiting through their relief nursery funding, but also are often entities that hold other home visiting contracts, like through Healthy Families. And Kara then gave us the capacity to pull those key stakeholders together to make sure we had a clear shared purpose for coming together. Nobody needs more meetings if they're just going to be for meeting. So why is it important for us to have conversations with each other and take that time in our day to coordinate? Two, make sure that all of us internally, the stakeholders themselves, have a clear understanding of what the home visiting landscape is and what the 2025 needs from the Oregon State Legislature were. And then build a collective strategy for advocating for those with some common talking points, a common one-pager, which I'll share, and I think were in your meeting materials. So around that table for the home visiting partnership are representation from the state-funded home visiting programs, like Nurse Family Partnership, Healthy Families Oregon, Early Head Start, Parents as Teachers, and then the state agencies themselves, like Department of Early Learning and Care, ODHS, Oregon Health Authority, and then ancillary stakeholders like philanthropy that funds and invests in home visiting and understands these systems well and programs, advocacy organizations like the Children's Institute. And Kara also really took time to make sure that there were culturally specific home visiting providers at the table, many of whom are subcontractors of primary contractors. And so their voices don't emerge unless you unless you are intentional about bringing culturally specific home visitors to the table as well. And yet those voices are critical in shaping the needs and strategy and how we talk about these services. Even though we've only been coming together for a few months, I'm excited to report that we've made quick headway on our goals. It was really affirming to watch everyone come together and quickly say, like, yes, there was early consensus. Yes, we need to do this. Yes, we can advocate together as a collective. We do not need to get into fighting for table scraps. We need to clearly ask for the investment in all of the programs that all of them need, because they all serve a purpose and they're all part of this system we're seeking to build. So we do have a clear purpose for coming together and great attendance and participation in the meetings that are happening. We have built an understanding of each other's programs and the needs of each program that are being sought in the 2025 legislative session. And we built a set of shared foundational messages and a common one-pager that we're using to help us make the case. There's about $27 million in asks this legislative session, collectively across home visiting programs. I popped that one pager in the chat. So you can kind of see there on that one pager some of those shared talking points and shared asks. And then tomorrow, we're really excited that the Senate Early Childhood and Behavioral Health Committee has invited stakeholders to come and do an informational hearing on home visiting as a strategy. And then when that informational hearing closes, they'll go into 2 bill hearings, one for Nurse Family Partnership and one for Healthy Families Oregon, that will bring sustainability and expansion opportunity to both of those programs. Thank you for sharing that one pager. So you can see it gives a quick, like, what is home visiting, and what are the things in Oregon? What are the stats in Oregon that tell us that home visiting is needed? Just speaking to the bigger systemic challenges that can be headed off by a strong home visiting system. That if you scroll down, there's some common data we can share about how home visiting works and the impacts that it has. And then on the second page really has those programmatic asks broken out by the program. So we are using that around the building and sharing it with the Senate Early Childhood and Behavioral Health Committee tomorrow. And we'll get an ask in to do this in the House Early Childhood Committee as well. The last thing I'll say, I know you're getting close to the end of your time. This work is important for this 2025 legislative session, but also the idea here is this helps us create fertile ground into the future. Many of these legislators are going to be legislators again in 2026, 2027, 2028, 2029, and we need to continue to keep coming back to them, building their understanding and support so we have those internal champions. So our home visiting programs are strong, but also bigger picture. So Oregon just isn't stuck in year after year of downstream approaches being like, oh my gosh, why are so many people experiencing substance use disorder? Oh my gosh, why are so many people houseless? Oh my gosh, why are so many people experiencing mental illness? If we head off early childhood trauma, if we reduce ACEs, if we promote healing, if we promote strong families, a lot of these other late stage challenges go away. I know I'm preaching to the choir here. So I'll stop there and happy to answer any questions you may have about the partnership.
All right, thank you, Dana. Any questions from council members? No, it's great work, and I think we will all benefit. Kids and families will benefit from having this partnership put together, Dana. So thank you very much for taking the lead on that, and also for encouraging Senator Reynolds' committee to host a significant portion of their meeting tomorrow on home visiting system development. So you're a wonderful leader and a wonderful partner. We appreciate you. Yay. And we'll see you at the Capitol.
Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Dana. Bye-bye. All right, guys, we have a 5-minute stretch break.
I had a schedule.
our agency partners. We really appreciate you being here. We've just had the last 2 hours of hearing about home visiting from a system standpoint with the coordinating center at PSU. We've heard from some very exciting regional home visiting programs that show both the coordination of early learning along with the healthcare system, how important that is, and how important some of the ODHS programs are as a part of that network.
We're the most important.
That's what you say. Really, we're so excited to be in Salem in person and see people in 3D. So thank you for being here. And Dr. Williams, we want to thank you for being online. Is Dr. Williams on?
She's there. Yeah, it's just taking a second to load
Oh,
her
okay.
camera, but she's there.
Coming. Got it. So council, when we talked to our agency partners about this meeting, we obviously said we're going to focus on home visiting. And we would love to know what programs you run, what at the state level, what's happening regionally. And of course, our bottom line question always is, what can the council do to support your work and to support the building of a system that works for families and children? So with that as background, I think we just put you in alphabetical order on the agenda, and Chatterjee comes up first. So Alyssa, nice to see you.
Great to see you. Well, yes, so I know we had a couple of questions to answer, so I'll kind of go through those and I'm happy to answer more. So the first question, thinking about DELC and our priorities for home visiting specifically, we really see home visiting woven throughout all 6 of our goals in Growing Oregon Together that were really informed by Raise Up Oregon. So our high-level goals are access to services, centering tribal sovereignty, prioritizing care for infants and toddlers, supporting the early childhood workforce, strengthening relationships with community, and building strong foundations as a new agency. And so for home visiting, this really means focusing on workforce compensation and retention in particular, and recognizing that if our home visiting programs are going to provide that high level of access and serve as many families as they can, we need to be able to retain highly qualified staff and recruit new home visitors that really represent the diverse lived experiences of the families and children in their communities. So while that obviously has a workforce piece, we see that as kind of a core component across those strategies. And we're really tracking progress through program reports on workforce compensation, as well as retention and composition of the workforce. At the program level, we have really 3 main programs that have, 4, that have home visiting as a component. We have Healthy Families Oregon, we have Relief Nurseries, Oregon prenatal to kindergarten, and then some of our early childhood equity fund grantees are offering services similar to home visiting. And so throughout those programs, they're tracking staff and child family progress and outcomes. So this allows the program to ensure that they're not just effective in improving outcomes for their community as well as the workforce, but also responding to our goals as an agency to provide comprehensive, culturally competent, and equitable services to families. Internally at DELC, we're in the process of building some new structural foundations with our goal 6, including data systems. So while this is a lengthy process, we are aiming to really more efficiently and effectively track progress across multiple programs. So we've started developing program dashboards that are available on our website for OPK, Preschool Promise, and ERDC as starting points. But we'll be adding more programs as this data kind of revision process continues forward. At the regional level, we see kind of 3 key components to the system. So hubs continue to play that critical convening role and really connecting and coordinating services in their communities, including home visiting programs. And as you heard earlier, that can vary in terms of approach, depending on the hub. But we also know that a key part of the hub role is centering family voice in policy recommendations and bringing that up through to DELC as well. And so they're a key piece of helping
us as Delk build a shared vision and support our strategic planning efforts by evaluating regional successes, barriers, and opportunities. And that's been a big part of the conversations we've been having with the hub vision work over the last year. We also, of course, heard about COVES for the first part of this meeting, and really being that program neutral backbone for supporting both state and regional coordination of services, and then the home visiting collaborative. And so that includes, as well as other state agency staff and representatives from home visiting programs that meet regularly to share implementation successes and challenges at the local, regional, and state levels. And elevate that information to COVES and state agency home visiting leads. So that's sort of the regional leverage. At the state level, our staff at Delk meet regularly with OHA to provide coordination and updates on home visiting programs. This has been particularly pronounced around McBee and Medicaid reimbursements for some HFO programs. And then we work closely with the Department of Human Services to really leverage resources and funding, including Title IV B2, Title 10, Family First Preventive Services, and have data sharing agreements to improve access and utilization of programs like TANF and programs. And then, of course, I think the council is a key partner in this, both with the Home Visiting Advisory Committee and to really support the joint funding across all of our agencies for the COVES work at PSU. Do you want me to keep going to the last question? Do you want me to pause?
How about if you pause,
Yep.
and then we'll go to Dr. Hathi and then your boys.
Great.
Welcome, Dr. Hathi. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So really appreciate the opportunity to share more about OHA's priorities for home visiting in 2025. I do want to situate those priorities in the context of our broader strategic plan. So some of you may know that late last year, we issued for the first time a roadmap clarifying and crystallizing how we're going to reach this aspirational bold vision of eliminating health inequities by 2030, which remains the guiding principle for all our programs and policies across the agency. And central to that vision, one of 5 pillars is our commitment to fostering healthier families and environments, and particularly emphasizing the perinatal and early childhood periods, which we recognize wield outsized impacts on health and well-being throughout the lifespan. And so that there are a series of strategies and actions under that pillar that we have committed to taking over the course of the next 6 years. In addition, we launched in partnership with the National Philanthropy, the CDC Foundation at the end of last year, a statewide call to action where we are seeking to galvanize a coalition of partners across the spectrum in and out of healthcare to advance this goal and this vision alongside us, because we recognize, just as embodied, I think, by the coalition of folks in this room, a singular agency cannot eliminate health inequities on its own. A singular state government cannot foster healthier families, make Oregon the best place to start or raise a new family on its own. That vision demands collective action, whole of society effort, and that's the intent and the impetus behind our call to action. So we are hoping that over the course of the next year, we will see partners again across the spectrum step up to support us in realizing our collective vision, including for the early childhood period, around which we're grateful to partner with this group in this room. And so OHA's home visiting programs, you may know, run the gamut. And about 40% of our population currently is able to access Family Connects International, has access to it, but unfortunately we know from recent reports that only 8 to 18% of folks actually are taking advantage of those services. And that's for a variety of reasons, including difficulty operationalizing it, knowing about it, billing for it, the fact that the same workforce, nursing workforce, is often the one that is responsible for and tasked with administering the full panoply of home visiting programs, of which Family Connects is only one. So one of our priorities for this year, and this to the first question that was posed to each of the agency directors, is improving coordination and facilitation across all of the nurse home visiting models to better meet the needs of the families and ensure that we're maximizing uptake of these critical services that we know, again, improve health and well-being and kind of outcomes for babies and for families. And so what we're intending to do is facilitating referrals, for instance, into Babies First and Cocoon from Family Connects Oregon, ensuring that we're deduplicating nursing support by taking the nurse family partnership eligible birth population out of the FCO eligible birth population, measuring and acting on program satisfaction by families in need. We're also excited to take advantage of the Center for Coordinating Oregon's home visiting system to improve coordination and alignment with home visiting programs at the state and local level beyond just those nurse partnership programs that we run. And, you know, there are multiple layers of this. We sit on the home visiting committee, the steering committee. Obviously, we're involved in the collaborative, but we're hoping that both within OHA and beyond OHA, we can again improve coordination and integration of these home visiting models. Because at the end of the day, for families, they just need and want these services. They don't quite care which specific program denomination that they are using. And so how do we ensure that this is one cohesive system for everyone, that if you are eligible for a program, you are getting access to that program and being connected to the services and supports to which you are entitled. That is the vision that we're building toward, but it will take all of us working together to make sure that billing, operations, workforce, all of those are aligned if we're going to meet that aim. So briefly, that's the answer to our first question. And Kate Wilcox has done a lot of work in detailing for me all the steps that the team is taking to bring that vision to life. But for the sake of time, I'll turn it rather here to Fair Boards, my DHS, to maybe speak to that first question as well.
Are we doing one question at a time?
Yeah.
Why not? Welcome.
All right. You know, I did bring help there on the screen. But as it relates to the first question, naturally, you know, we are not, the scope of our home visiting program is nothing close to OHA or DELC. We are primarily focused on our foster care population, which has shrunk significantly since 2018 from around 8,000 to 4,500. But still, it's a pretty important program because the focus really is to keep kids out of foster care. And our program is really based, it operates under the umbrella of Family First. All of you know about the Family First program. It was there used to be a phrase called bipartisan, I think, that it actually passed in 2018 through the Bipartisan Budget Act, also known as the Family First Prevention Services Act. And really the intent of that act was to keep children at home to the extent possible, prevent entry into foster care. So there are basically two preventive pathways in ODHS that we provide these things. One is through the Title IV-E prevention services, and the second one is through community prevention services. As it relates to Title IV-E, there's still two different pathways for that. One is expanding the implementation and the scope of parents as teachers. You all know about that. It's a pretty important national program. We also, the second piece is continuing partnership with tribes around a program, specific program that they have that's called Family Spirit. It's a tribal home visiting program. It's actually an evidence-based program that was designed by Johns Hopkins Center for Indigenous Health. It is culturally sensitive, naturally, to Native American families. It starts with weekly visits, up to 3 months. Then it goes to every other week. Then it goes to every month. Then it goes to every other month until the child is 3 years old. And yeah, it's a very effective program. Our team does the evaluation. We have a quality control unit. They do the measuring and are we meeting targets, etc. on these programs. And then as it relates to our community prevention services, we also have two priorities for the 2025 year. One is to continue building capacity for sustainable implementation of just care home visiting services. And again, Sydney Nestor, our district manager for Miriam Camp Hill, she'll help us with the second and the third question. I can also tell you actually what's happening on the ground, because that is where the work is happening. And then the second piece is continuing partnership with communities to support community-specific, culturally responsive services. All of this is focused on preventing involvement in child foster care or transition to the extent possible back to community. The other aspect of our work is really focused on increasing capacity in relief nurseries, because they are a equal asset to help keep families and kids out of our system. Additionally, specifically in District 3, again, that's Sydney's district, Miriam Camp Hill, we collaborate in several different ways. We have 4 community partner coordinators. These folks actually serve as a liaison between community partners, connecting services together, identifying resources for families to access, etc. We have 3 resource developers. We have 3 recovery support professionals. Many of you know that one of the things that we deeply struggle with is substance use for families and family involvement. Specifically, these recovery support staff do their best to support the families, connect them to services, making sure that they can overcome those, because that is one of the biggest barriers to families, either keeping kids within the family or getting them back from the child welfare system. We also provide intensive case management services, and all of that is provided through community partners. Sydney will share some of the community partners that we're working with in these 3 counties. And again, they're doing the work. We're really just providing the resources. So that is the answer to the first question.
Thank you, Fairbourse. And I think Director Williams is on. Hi, yes.
Yes.
Welcome. Good to see you again, Dr. Williams.
Thank you all for your patience. I'm on my phone because for whatever reason, Zoom is not working on my laptop. So can everyone hear me okay?
Yes. Yep, that's great. You're great.
Awesome. And I think I heard, are we just doing the first question?
Sure. We're going to start with the first question and then rotate around.
Okay. That sounds good. Give me 2 seconds here. As far as our priorities, the Oregon Department of Education houses early intervention and early childhood special education. As many of you are aware, the program EIECSC. Home visiting is a service delivery model in the early intervention program, and it's designed to support infants and toddlers with developmental delays and disabilities in their natural environments. Under Part C of the Individuals with Disabilities Act, the IDEA, early intervention prioritized family-centered practices that enhance caregivers' ability to support their child's development through everyday routines and interactions. ODE's priorities and approach to measuring progress for early learning intervention, home visiting for 2025 are to implement an effective child find process to identify infants and toddlers in Oregon who qualify for early intervention services. And we're going to measure progress and outcomes by an annual review of regional child find plans within each county service area plan. A quarterly review of screening numbers from the Oregon Screening Project, and a quarterly review of statewide and regional referral numbers for early intervention. and through facilitation of a bi-monthly intake referral coordinator community of practice to address barriers and solutions to the referral and intake process. Because we know the earlier we identify these children, the better. We also want to ensure children who qualify for early intervention services are evaluated and receive an individualized family service plan within 45 days of their referral. And we're going to measure outcomes by monthly monitoring of 45-day timelines for all regions throughout their systems, EC Web, and review and tracking of 45-day correction plans. And then finally, we want to improve child outcomes for infants and toddlers with disabilities. We measure this progress and outcomes by collecting and reviewing child outcome data in the areas of 1, positive social emotional skills, 2, acquisition and use of knowledge and skills, and 3, use of appropriate behaviors to meet needs. And we'll be reviewing and monitoring our regional child outcome improvement plans. And as always, I sing Kara Williams praises because she's the one who definitely helps inform and equip me with this information that our amazing team is doing to support our young ones.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Williams. And yes, we appreciate Kara a lot.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of interaction between Kara and Delk staff. So thank you for your comments. We've already heard from Director Chatterjee about the second question, which is about regional. And because Dr. Hathi has to leave for a legislative meeting at 11:45, Dr. Hathi, if you would just go ahead and do questions 2 and 3. So we make sure we get you out of here in time.
Yeah, sure. So I talked about our interest in priority for this next year in integrating and facilitating better coordination across the home visiting programs, maximizing uptake and expanding the reach of our existing sites. I think our goal this coming year is to reach at least 60% of eligible families, as well as launch 4 new Family Connect sites. And alluded to the various ways that we'll intend or seek to do that. But to the point of the second question, we can't do that alone, and there are a number of state and local organizations with which we collaborate in supporting this overall effort. And so these include local public health authorities, of course, early learning hubs, and then CCOs. In one case, that's one and the same entity, and various nonprofit organizations to coordinate elements of home visiting systems. We also are really grateful for the opportunity to continue to provide leadership and funding for the Center for Connecting Oregon's Home Visiting System. You know, I think Kate, who I mentioned earlier, supports that effort strongly. We also are involved in the HVS collaborative. And then through the MCV grant, we provide funding that supports those fora, about $45,000 annually. We also continue to work with the Oregon Perinatal Collaborative and the MMRC to implement their recommendations, of which home visiting is a key strategy. And we're about to publish the latest MMRC report, just reiterating how important home visiting is to reducing severe maternal morbidity and maternal mortality. And then we continue to support home visiting models that require local community advisory councils and ensure connection and connectivity across the board to local public health and CCO community advisory councils across the state. In terms of the third question, what historically marginalized communities are served by OHA's home visiting programs and how we assess their access and their outcomes. I would, I think, be remiss to not note that Family Connects International, of course, has a universal approach. And so it's intended to offer support to all families with newborns, no matter their needs. But I think this group is well aware of the varying eligibility criteria for the other home visiting programs and how they're intended to support families and young children with different medical as well as social needs to ensure that we are providing tailored supports and services. And all of those programs are implemented with a focus on language access and hiring to support home visiting and families, primary home languages with culturally and linguistically responsive providers that reflect the local populations served. And as is a longstanding OHA commitment, data that we collect from those programs about their access and their reach is analyzed according to our Realty SOGI standards, which we are continuing to build out through our repository, which will go live in the next year and a half.
Awesome. All right, so OHA isn't doing much.
Before you leave it, I think we have an ask of all of you before you leave. We had a great discussion earlier this morning. Beth Green and her colleagues and colleagues were here, and from their landscape and the work that they've done to develop the landscape, the first recommendation is to develop state-level cross-agency expectations and timelines for regional cross-sector collaboration that includes family leadership. Dr. Hyde, you were just pointing on that. Our ask is, can you lean on Kate a little bit more? Can you lean on your RUAC members to actually prioritize that? If that's the first recommendation that we've been given from the system, we'd like to respond to it. So if you can help us respond to it by making sure your RUAC members prioritize that, hopefully have a recommendation to come to the home visiting committee in a couple months. That's what we're hoping to do. So what's that cross-sector, expectation, expectation, what we're going to see.
Right. Fortunately, Kate's in the room. So
Yeah. So
I'm not talking behind her back. And she hasn't passed out yet. So that's good. No, we really appreciate what each of your agencies invests in the RUAC, which is the coordinating team of your top managers to actually implement Raise Up Oregon. And without RUAC, we wouldn't have a shot really at seeing the implementation happen in a coordinated manner. So we appreciate you supporting Kate and others at OHA to work together with other partners. So thank you, Dr. Hathi, and good luck across the street.
Yes, we need that. Good luck these days.
I'm guessing I can say that to all of you.
She's holding her own.
Have a great day.
You too. You too, Dr. Hathi. All right. So Fair Voice, how about, or Sydney, however you're going to handle.
Sure.
Question.
Yes, go ahead, Sydney. Thank you for being with us.
Yeah. Hi, Sydney. Good to see you again.
Hello, good to see you all. How's my sound?
Sounds great.
Okay, great. Thank you. I am joining you from sunny Arizona today. So sorry, that's like my little plug for
Sunshine here today, so don't.
Oh, good. Well, I'm glad you're getting some sun too. All right. So thanks for letting me respond to questions 2 and 3. So again, I'm just talking about this from our local level. So as Director Fairbourse mentioned, I'm Sydney Nestor, and I am the district manager for District 3, Marion, Polk, and Yamhill, supporting self-sufficiency, child welfare, and Oregon eligibility partnership. So I think it would be important to start with many of the both contractual and just collaborative relationships we have with local community partners that are working in the home visiting space are things that we're doing jointly with child welfare and SSP. So we've been able in many ways to combine our funding in order to have some extra impact with many of our contracted services. So we have a number of providers that we work with and that we really rely on in D3, and I'm only just going to list a couple in the interest of time. First, I want to highlight Tu Familia, and so hopefully y'all are familiar with that organization. This is one of our most effective self-sufficiency partnerships, specifically in the home visiting space, and they primarily support our families that are Spanish speakers. Spanish is a primary language. They are so successful in the work that they do, supporting that particular population of families, that in the next biennium, we are adding specialized support for Pacific Islander families also. So that's something that Two Familia will be taking on in the next biennium, and we're really excited to see how they do with that. We've got a couple of different contracts with options, and I want to highlight that one of those contracts supports parents who have significant mental health challenges as they're parenting their children. So again, as a home visiting, I think home visiting is one of the most impactful ways to support families, especially families with complex needs. And so Options is our primary partner with that. I wanted to highlight Fostering Hope. That's a program probably many of you are familiar with through Catholic Community Services. They provide a similar level of support as Two Familia, but one really exciting thing that's probably really relevant in this early childhood conversation is that a number of their community health workers are also certified doulas. The other relationship I wanted to highlight is one for Yamhill County Lutheran Family Services. So I see Dr. Miller here could probably speak more about that than I can, but they have a wide variety of intensive in-home services that they provide, including a family place, which focuses on children 0 to 5. And then we have incredibly strong relationships with our Early Learning Hub. So Marion Polk Early Learning Hub, and then in Yamhill, and I sit on the executive board for Marion Polk Early Learning Hub. And we have both a contractual and just what I would call a really strong collaborative partnership with them. Do you want me to roll into question 3?
So Sydney, we can't forget Family Building Blocks, the former directors.
Well, yes, and they were on my list, and I didn't mention 3 or 4, including Family Building Blocks. So thank you for that, Fair Boars. Yes, we don't have a contractual relationship with them, but they are one of our strongest partners in terms of that. Again, specifically the early learning space, the 0 to 5 space. Those positions that Fair Boars talked about, the resource developers, the community partnership coordinators, those folks are really key to helping our family coaches in SSP and our case managers in child welfare make those connections and referrals to all of these providers that I've described, including Family Building Blocks.
Thank you, Sydney.
Yes. Do you want me to go to question 3?
Actually, I think I'd like to wait and go
Okay.
to Williams for the second question about the regional involvement. Thank you.
Thank you. So at the regional level, EIECSE works with several state and local agencies and community organizations, so in coordination of home visiting. The programs vary by region and include Early Head Start, Healthy Families, Family Nurse Partnership, Babies First, Cocoon, behavioral health programs, and others. And as far as leadership in these efforts, that also varies by region. Collaboration may be facilitated by the EIECSE program, through their local interagency coordinating council, or in coordination with their early learning hub, or through other advisory committees or regular check-in meetings with partners. So that's a summary of how we're doing regionally.
Lots of important partnerships, obviously. Thank you. Let's go then to the third question. And Alyssa, do you want to start with?
Yeah, so we were asked kind of what historically marginalized communities are served by our home visiting program. So our programs within DELC are not universal. So between Healthy Families, Oregon Relief Nurseries, Oregon Prenatal Kindergarten, and Early Childhood Equity Fund, we do have varying eligibility guidelines that can include low-income or economically disadvantaged groups, folks experiencing disabilities, cultural or linguistic specific backgrounds, tribal nations, geography, or families experiencing housing insecurity or houselessness, or other family characteristics, depending on the program itself. And so our programs at DELC are really targeting some of those marginalized communities through the kind of targeted universalism approach that we've adopted for our early childhood system. And in terms of kind of assessing, our programs collect family and child characteristics and outcome data. They're able to then utilize this data to assess access and utilization by different communities and populations, and then develop improvement strategies for outcomes, support recruitments for communities who aren't accessing services. And as I mentioned earlier at DELC, what we're working on is kind of building out a more robust data collection system. One kind of exciting milestone coming up in the next couple of months is the Healthy Families Oregon database. So we did secure funding in the 23 session to finally have an HFO database. So for anyone who served with Martha Brooks, you know, this was a big priority for her. And so this is going to be the first system to provide DELC with child and family level data related to a home visiting program. So important step, you know, first of many, but we're launching that by the end of the biennium, and we've got a funding request as part of our POP 101 for the maintenance costs for that new system.
So is this really going to happen this time?
Yeah. Yes.
We've been here, what, 2 or 3 years times ago?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
So yes, we actually got the funding in 23. The vendors got on board. So I think we're looking at potentially a launch by April, but definitely by the end of the biennium. So it's very close. It's real.
Will that database be able to also incorporate data from DHS and OHA so we can get a picture of what's happening with families?
Right now, it's just focused on the Healthy Families Oregon program. At large, we're looking at really starting with our own program data collection. I think, you know, there were big dreams years ago to have the house and the rooms
That's right.
and be able to kind of have a way to bring all the data together. But this system we're building is just to meet the Healthy Families America requirement.
But Fairboards has one eligibility, so you can be the house, right?
We can do everything.
You were the best, so.
Who's the homeowner here?
Right.
Yeah, Peter, thank you for that question. 2 significant barriers remain as we look at this integration of data. One is old systems. Because even though the one system is a modern system, the information, especially around financial information, is all coming from old legacy. Meaning these are systems that I used to write programs in college. I'm not kidding. It's COBOL, you know, that language. The other piece is just the barriers around data sharing. Right. There are so many different, you know, even in Southern Oregon, we were successful in some cases to share data within schools, like with great success. But it's really, so those 2 things, we need to overcome those in order to get where you want to get to. And hopefully what's happening at the federal level is not going to delay things. I mean, we can sit here and promise all kinds of stuff, and 2 weeks from now, things could look completely different. So that's
Right.
Yeah. But I thank you. I mean, that's where we need to get.
Yeah, great question, Peter. Okay, all right, we'll give you a little leeway on that.
All right, Sydney, question
All right.
number 3.
Yes, Sydney.
There we go. All right, question number 3. So I wanted just one thing that I was remiss that I didn't say in the last question is just to really, I want to underscore the work of our family coaches and SSP and what they do in terms of supporting families in the home and their home visiting. And while the work they do is certainly different than our contracted providers, it's that those relationships that they build, ensuring that families have access to the right resources they need, helping them create a plan that's their own plan for their family well-being, I think is really important. So just wanted to mention that. In terms of what are some of the historically marginalized communities that are being served, you know, I mentioned some, just you could hopefully see some good diversity across our contracted providers in terms of how we meet some of our specialized populations. I'm just going to do a couple little call outs. In Polk County, we're doing some strategic work with our unsheltered families. So, you know, in ODHS, all the contracts that we have and the support that we provide is to the whole family, not just to the 0 to 5 group. But we have particularly found, it wouldn't be a surprise to anyone, the extreme vulnerability that our unsheltered families have, in particular when they have infants and toddlers. So there are some things that we are working on specifically and some improvements that we need to continue to make around providing adequate support. My opinion is that families with young children who are unsheltered, especially those who are unsheltered and living in camps, as opposed to maybe just moving from home to home with people that they know are, I think, are an especially vulnerable population. And while they would qualify for many of the services and supports that have been discussed here, they often have many barriers to accessing those services. We also are currently in conversations with Emerging Unidos, which is a local organization out of Woodburn that serves migrant farm worker families primarily. And so it's yet to see what that partnership will look like, but hoping in the new biennium that we will be contracting with them with the intention to be providing, again, support to those really vulnerable families. I think I just also wanted to say, which I think this probably goes without saying, but these are just examples of some things that we're doing in D3. Obviously, every district is meeting the needs of their own specific communities with a wide variety of different contractual partnerships and relationships. But thanks for letting me share some of the things we're doing here.
Thank you, Sydney. You know, I'm very excited to hear about the Polk County focus on homeless people. One of the statistics that our coordinating center provided this morning was 43% of women aged 18 to 25 experiencing homelessness are pregnant or parenting. So I'm delighted to hear that there's some programs that are really focused on that.
We also work really closely with Church in the Park. Here, I'm sure you know, we have a connection with them as well. They provide great service. They do have some younger kids, and of course, Catholic Community Services is really foundational to help make that happen. Sydney also mentioned Lutheran Community Services. Naturally, they're also very closely working with the immigrant population. And just for all of you, I think you're already aware of this, but because of what's happening at the federal level with focus on deportation, etc., what we are seeing now is people hesitant to come and receive services. That, you know, when parents are impacted, children are impacted. When you're afraid to receive food assistance, cash assistance, etc., you're not getting your baby needs met. So there is this reverberation impact that I don't think we have yet seen and felt the full impact of that.
Saying that in regard to focus, even though we're not collecting any immigration data for preschool promise, okay, folks don't want to risk it.
So they aren't showing up.
Yeah. Or we're telling them they're eligible and they don't want to enroll.
It was interesting. I mean, it's tragic, obviously, is the main word, but so home visiting services where we actually go out to them instead of them needing to come into our programs may be more important than ever, right?
Absolutely.
Assuming they're willing to sign up for those. I don't know. Horrible times. Okay, thank you, Sydney, for that information. And Dr. Williams, we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you. And I'll be pretty quick with this one because the early intervention serves infants and toddlers with developmental delays and disabilities, which is, in fact, a historically marginalized population. And we also look at the intersectionality because our families come from many different backgrounds, you know, such as families, of course, experiencing poverty or houselessness, Black, Indigenous, people of color, migrant communities, multilingual families, non-English speakers, all of those things. And at the department, we have that practice. Number one, we are an agency that leads and believes in equity and inclusion, and disaggregating our data and analyzing it by all of these intersectionalities. And we're also looking at, for this particular program, analyzing the referral data. So what's happening in terms of the referrals into the program, the enrollment data, as well as the child outcome data. And Sue and team, I just want to invite you to think about, we are, as an agency, embarking on launching our strategic plan. Our current plan ends at the end of this year, and we'll need some community early learning voice on our steering committee, so that as we develop like our transparency dashboards and our plans for 2630, how do we assure that we reflect the values of around early learning that will be supportive of, not only the home visiting pieces, but, all things early learning as well, in partnership with Delk and others around the table. So just wanted to plant that seed.
All right, thank you for that invitation. I'm sure we will definitely accept the invitation. We'd love to be at that table. Wouldn't we, Susan?
I would love to volunteer.
And just for your information, Dr. Williams, at our next council meeting, right, Gabby? We're going to have a report from the statewide interagency coordinating commission, right? So we're looking forward to hearing from them and getting updated on what SIG is doing as well. So, thank you. Of course, we're out of time. We appreciate all of you, Dr. Williams and Fairbours and Alyssa, for being here today, but also for the work that you and your colleagues are doing. We're here to support you. Several of us are going to the legislature and advocating for all of your work around young children and their families who need our support. So please look to us to be partners with you in your work. Thank you so much. Thank you. Have a good afternoon. Thanks, Dr. Williams. Good to see you again. Okay, council, we actually have a lunch break.
Oh, wow.
And lunches are